Welcome into Real Biz. I'm your host, Bubba Startz, and with me today from Employment Disability Resources, Vicki Stewart. Vicki, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
It is absolutely my pleasure to have you on today. We're going to talk a lot about the foundation and everything that you're doing to help employers and those who are disabled to come together and to really change our community, especially here in South Dakota, where your foundation is based. Before we get into all that, though, I want to get a little bit of your backstory, and then we'll get a little bit of the backstory of the foundation as well.
Sure, sounds good. I was born with the disease osteogenesis imperfecta, otherwise known as OI or brittle bone disease. So I probably had about 45 broken bones throughout my lifetime. I've used a wheelchair all of my life. I am the youngest of 6 kids. No one else has this disability. So basically, it was a genetic fluke. I was fortunate enough to be able to attend public school from kindergarten through high school, and had a lot of support from family and friends in my small town. I then went on to college at Augustana University, where I lived on campus all 4 years. A bit of a challenging time for me, being away from my family and friends and just navigating independent living and being on campus. But it worked out great, and I am so glad that I attended college and really got to meet a wonderful group of people, professors, fellow students, all of that. So my passion all of my life really has been to make things more inclusive for people with disabilities, whether that be in independent living, employment, transportation, volunteering, just being involved in our community as much as possible. Because I think the more that we isolate ourselves, the more we start to add things like depression and things like that. So if we can get out in our community and interact with others, I think it's really positive for everyone.
Yes, so you're obviously very invested personally, having the lived experience of being someone who's lived with a disability their entire lives and having to do this. So I think it's really, incredible what you're doing for others, and not just for the disabled, but really what you're doing to help the able-bodied and the able-minded to understand a little bit of the challenges that you face. Because and even from speaking from my own personal experiences, that I don't know your struggles. I don't know everything that you're going for, which means that I also don't know how to be more inclusive and how to address those challenges if I'm not aware of them at all.
Correct. We don't know what we don't know, right? So that's a big part of what I do at Employment Disability Resources, is just to raise awareness and provide education.
Yeah, I think that's where it all starts.
Right. We have to start from somewhere.
So, Vicki, what is it inside of the foundation? And kind of let's get a little bit of the inception, I guess, and we'll kind of start from there of the foundation and what kind of spurned this on and what keeps it going.
Sure. Well, we are a nonprofit organization, and we were established in 2010. I became executive director in 2016. And really, it was established because a group of businesses realized that there was an untapped pool of people who could be employed, who could fill those empty spots in their businesses. And so they came together to form the board, and eventually our nonprofit was established. So we work directly with employers to provide education, awareness, and resources to promote the employment of people with disabilities. The unemployment rate for people with disabilities is almost double that of people without disabilities. So we know we have a lot of work to do.
Well, no doubt, I think that a lot of employers are, I don't know that they're against hiring someone with a disability, right? But it poses certain challenges that they may not want to take on. And without the education and some of the resources behind it, which is really where your foundation is serving in that space, it can be very difficult for some of these people to understand, these owners and the CEOs and these people that are running a business that don't necessarily want to take on more that they have no idea about.
Correct. Yeah, I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there. A lot of times people are fearful or uncomfortable. They're afraid that they might say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. So that's a lot of what we try to promote is disability etiquette. How do you talk to someone who looks different than you, thinks differently than you? We really just want employers to see the skills and the abilities of people with disabilities, because I think a lot of times we tend to focus on a person's disability because a lot of times it's very visible. Sometimes the disability is not visible at all. But if we can really look at a person's talents and skills, that really means a lot. And I think one of those myths that is out there is that providing accommodations to an employee with a disability is going to cost a lot for that business. And statistics show that's just not true. Most accommodations cost nothing. And if there is a cost, it's typically $300 or less. And once you hire someone with a disability, we hear all the time that they're very faithful, loyal, dependable employees. So you're going to have that employee for a long time if you simply provide those accommodations. And we all know that the cost of turnover can be very high. So it's really important to learn about the accommodations that are available. And one of the most highly requested accommodations is actually the same for people with disabilities and people without disabilities, and that's having a flexible schedule. So, again, that's no cost to the employer, and we all appreciate having that flexibility.
No doubt. It's a big reason why I left the workforce and started my own company, was to have the flexibility that wasn't being afforded to me, working full time in a factory. So where does a business who is interested in employing someone with disabilities, where would you start with them as someone who knows nothing and coming to you fresh? What's really the point of entry for EDR?
Yes, if they just reach out to me and we'll have that conversation. Communication is a huge, huge piece of this. Just to have that open, honest communication. I would probably ask where they're at. Have they ever employed someone with a disability? And if not, what can I provide to them? Do they want kind of an overall picture of some of those statistics about accommodations? Can I provide disability etiquette training to them and their staff? And then I'm able to connect them to resources in our community, like vocational rehabilitation, service to the blind and visually impaired. And they work directly with people with disabilities who are seeking employment. So then I can help make those connections and to make sure it's a good fit. Of course, not every person with a disability is going to fit into every job, but that's the way it is with people without disabilities too. So we really try to work on that and make those good fits.
So as someone who's obviously overcome a great many challenges in your personal life, do you feel that, being in this position as the executive director of the foundation, that it gives you a little bit of, I guess, an advantage into being able to look at the bigger picture, not just with the employers, but you're dealing with people with a very wide range of disabilities as well. It can be quite overwhelming, I'm sure, at times when you're trying to solve these problems, but you seem to me like someone who kind of relishes in that problem solving space.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I think my lived experience is very important in this position. And I hope to be an example for other people with disabilities who are seeking employment. I think it's important to see that representation, that there are people with disabilities out there in leadership positions, and that's not beyond their reach. If that's what they want, we can work together to make that come about.
Now, we talked a little bit about, helping businesses in that, that first in that hiring process. What are you doing to help businesses that are facing challenges even after they've hired someone on and now they're facing maybe some difficulties that have maybe worsened a little bit because of the disability, because obviously some disabilities are degenerative over time and that situation can change, but that doesn't necessarily mean that someone should lose their job over it either. And you start to get into some pretty sticky, employment, equality conversations inside of that. So what are some of the challenges that you've seen and that you've helped businesses overcome?
Well, a lot of times I work pretty closely with HR professionals because they're usually the front end people who work with accommodation requests and those kind of things. So I try to provide a lot of education to HR professionals, but a business can contact me at any point. If there are struggles or barriers that come up, we can visit about that. I'm happy to come into your business and to even have an open discussion with the employee with the disability and brainstorm and see what we need to do to make that person successful. Because again, the business doesn't want to lose an employee and have to start over again. So if we can brainstorm and think about maybe more accommodations that might be needed or that flexible schedule, there are a lot of things. And with assistive technology, assistive technology has come a long way over the years. And maybe it's just a matter of finding the right assistive technology to help that person be successful.
Yeah, really incredible. The consult that you can provide to the businesses and to the disabled person as well, and being able to bring them together and to have that conversation, because often it can be very hard for an able-bodied and able-minded to even broach that conversation because they're not able to do that. So it really is, communication is the foundation of not just your conversations and what you are doing in this space, but really as human beings, period.
Correct. Yeah. No matter what line of work you're in, I think communication is always a huge part.
So, Vicki, what are you doing to connect with businesses? Obviously, you're on the podcast today and we're promoting the foundation and what you're doing. But what else are you doing in the community to connect with businesses and to make yourself more visible to them?
Sure. Well, in every October, we have National Disability Employment Awareness Month. So we provide a lot of activities, educational conferences to businesses. We are doing a billboard campaign this year where we're featuring different employees in our community with disabilities. And so we want to shine the light on them and their employer just to get the word out that, we're here to provide support. We're also going to be a part of the WIN in Workforce Summit. That will be held in October. And we will be shining a light on our new video that shows what Employment Disability Resources does and how we can be a resource to your business. We also recently started a West Meets East virtual training. So it's once a month for half an hour. And my colleague in Western South Dakota joins me and we have a guest. So last month we were talking about post-traumatic stress disorder and how maybe the signs or symptoms, what accommodations people with PTSD need in the workplace. So it's very conversational, but a good way to, again, provide education at no cost to our businesses.
Right. And what that ends up doing is also creating a community of the businesses themselves and the owners and HR people where they can begin to use each other as a resource without necessarily having to come directly to you. They're able to look at other businesses, whether they're in the same industry or not, maybe looking at a similar situation and learning how really boots on the ground that they've solved the problem, because what you're offering is mostly in the consultation department, but it's ultimately up to the HR departments and the businesses themselves to provide the accommodations and to provide that environment where everything can get settled. So I think it's really awesome to be able to have in the virtual world, and you talk about technology really changing the world around us, how awesome to have the technology to communicate. And especially in a state like South Dakota, where your two major population centers are 400 miles apart and you don't often get the opportunity to meet in the middle. Now we have that opportunity. And for you to do it once a month, I think is really incredible.
Yeah, it's been a great platform, and we're open to questions during that. We always save the last 10 minutes for questions from our attendees. So it's just a really easy way to have those conversations about employing people with disabilities.
Well, and you face different challenges. Having grown up in Deadwood, I know the Black Hills area very well. The challenges that they face, mostly, I would say, or a lot of those can be just on the physical side of it, right? There's elevation everywhere you go in Western South Dakota has elevation. So you're talking about accessibility, right? A lot of conversations, I'm sure, around that. And then winter storms are a lot more prevalent in Western South Dakota. So accommodations on the flexibility of schedules and, having, once again, accessibility because, getting around for disabled people when there's snow on the ground and ice and those kind of conditions. Not that we don't get that here in Eastern South Dakota as well. It's much more prevalent. And on the other side of the state, Sioux Falls is a much larger city, which makes some of these jobs much more competitive. How are we able to, address the issues of an already competitive market because of the population and now trying to lower that unemployment rate for our disabled people in that market? So two very different problems on each side of the state, but a lot of challenges that can maybe overlap with one another.
Right. And the Americans with Disabilities Act is so important. And I am happy to provide information to any business that wants more information. Sometimes I get calls about what should I do to my parking lot to make it more ADA accessible. I have maybe one step into my business. What would be an easy way that I could accommodate and maybe provide a short ramp to enter the building? So I'm more than happy to provide information about that as well. This year's the 36th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act being signed. And while it's provided so much to people with disabilities, we still need to continue to work towards making our community as accessible as possible. And again, I tell people, if you see something, say something. If you see that something's not accessible, we need to bring that to the forefront so that we can have those discussions on how to make it more accessible.
Well, and ultimately, you want to not just make it accessible, but to make it safe. The last thing we want for anyone is for someone to get hurt because the resources weren't directed to something that could have been problematic. And we see this a lot. Like I mentioned, growing up in Lee Deadwood area, a lot of these buildings are historic buildings as well. So retrofitting them is a very deep and can be a lengthy conversation to make sure that you are preserving the historic nature of that, but also making it accessible and bringing it into, the current age. So it can be very deep conversations. Sometimes there can be cost associated with the accessibility, but I have to imagine that there's a plethora of grants and things that are out there to help these businesses to offset some of those costs.
There are definitely tax incentives available. So to provide a ramp, for instance, if you want to provide a ramp at your business, you can use deductions when you file your taxes to use that as a write-off. So there are definitely incentives available to make those accommodations. And what I always tell people is that accommodations and accessibility isn't just for people with disabilities. Think of a curb cut. That benefits people who use wheelchairs, but it's also great for parents who might be pushing a stroller or an elderly person who might be using a walker. So those accommodations benefit everyone.
Right. And I don't think that we often think of it that way, that yes, it has been enacted for those who are disabled, but we all get to benefit from it. Who doesn't like walking up the ramp instead of taking the stairs, or an elevator in a building that otherwise may not have it?
Correct. And those door openers, right? I mean, if you have your hands full, it's really nice to just push a button and have the door open. So
how incredible and nice to know that our country it has continued to advance accessibility and is constantly renewing and becoming better. And I know that we often focus on the negative things around in our country, but we've done so much good and so many whether it's a law or acts that have been enacted in our society, we have bettered the world as a whole, because a lot of what starts here in the United States through our political system spreads out worldwide and really changes and makes everything more accessible around our entire planet. So really incredible. 36 years. Wow. It seems like it's flown by. That's most of my life, Vicki.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I was in college when it was signed into law. So definitely have seen some improvements, that's for sure. And another thing that I think people don't realize is that 1 in 4 people have some type of disability. So we are the largest minority group in the world, actually. And I also think that people forget you don't necessarily have to be born with a disability. You can acquire a disability through aging or illness or accident. So you could join this minority group at any time.
Well, and what makes it so much different than any other minority like that, right? You're not born into it. You can fall into it quite literally sometimes because of a work-related injury, and now your entire life has been changed. And I think that's why we need to keep working together. Why I love what your foundation is doing for not just the disabled people, but for the businesses to bring that education side, because as you stated off the beginning, we don't know what we don't know. And for me to be able to provide a platform to have this conversation is really quite a treat for me. And I look forward to working with you in the future to continue to raise awareness, not just around your foundation, but around so many other issues that are affecting, like you said, the largest minority in the world.
Great. Yes. And I so appreciate this because, it's word of mouth that really has an impact in the community here and at large. So we love to get the word out and have these conversations. It's important to talk about.
Fantastic. Well, it sounds like you got a busy month of October, a lot of stuff going on there. Where can people find you and find out more about the resources that you're offering? We obviously have the website, edrsd.org, scrolling across the bottom here. But where else could they find you and get in touch with you, Vicki?
You can also, we're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn. So please just type in Employment Disability Resources. You'll find us. You can give me a call, 605-215-1760. We also provide a monthly newsletter that's emailed out. So if you're interested in learning more, I'm happy to add you to our newsletter email list.
Well, fantastic. I'm going to go join the newsletter right now. Vicki, I'm so appreciative of your time. Thank you for coming on and sharing more about employment disability resources. And thank you for being part of the scene.
Thank you.